Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody to the lunchtime lecture. My name is Shakwan and I'll be your host today. It's a pleasure to see all of your wonderful faces in the room today. And I know online we will also have photos because today we have a very exciting topic. Today's speaker is former President Verla De Peiza, my mentor, a long-standing member of the Democratic Party, and of course, the chair of the Commission Crime in the Democratic Party. Today, Ms. Verla De Peiza will be presenting some elements from the report. And anyone who has any questions, so I'm just asking to bear with us please hold to the end to ask questions. For the persons online, if you want to, just share questions and we will have them here so that they can be answered. If not all of them, so yes, in a different setting. Comrade Verla, please come forward.
Thank you very much, comrades. Thank you for taking things for me today and Friday. I'm not going to spend any time at all discussing the crime situation in Barbados. You already know what it is. When this report was written and submitted to the editors, I think we had about 20 murders. By the time I got it back, we had 29, and by the time we were ready to go to print, we were at 30. By the time it actually came out, we were at 32. So you would know the timeline going there. That we are dealing with a very serious issue in Barbados. Now, at the press conference, there was an overview of the report and our findings, but today I want to spend some time on the recommendations. Not because some person thought to say that it was 200 pages and not a single recommendation, which only was an indictment on their reading capabilities, but because the country actually does need to know that there is something that can be done to fix the problems that we are in. I'm also going to speak to what is happening now in Parliament, not in our report at all, because of course it hadn't come up as yet. Now, it is as fluid a situation as that. But I think that what is transpiring in Parliament today is very pertinent to the management of crime in Barbados, and it would be remiss of me to speak today and not have a word about that. Now, when we began our work, and we started first with our own research, and then we went to the people, town hall meetings, the surveys, the walkabouts. After we had that information, we went back to the research, and this time we were concentrating on finding solutions. We understood for sure not just what we thought were the problems, but what the average Barbadian considered to be issues on the ground, and the solutions for those particular problems is what we were focusing on. The first and biggest, I would say, issue that was raised as we spoke to agencies was that they are satisfied that they do not have enough governmental support. This is not literally in terms of the government does not stand behind them, but that they have manpower shortages which are not being filled, and they have plant shortages, equipment shortages, which are also not being filled. And the bottom line for the two of them is that there are financial constraints which they are existing under. Every department said it. The police, the courts, the probation department, the welfare department, the child care board, all of them said the same thing. The complaints are the same across the board. We need more money, we need more people, and we need more equipment that would allow us to function as we want to in an optimal situation. So it is really simple, those solutions. Do the manpower audit and give them the staff that they want. Source the equipment that they think is necessary in order to function, and give them the money that they need in order to perform their duties well. It sounds like a tall order, but if you take them one by one, we will see that the solutions are not actually beyond us as a small country. In terms of the manpower, we have a problem with youth unemployment. And we have the University of the West Indies. What if, and this is not a new idea, what if the conversation with UE and the conversation with the secondary schools, in particular with their guidance counselors, allows them to promote certain jobs and make them seem interesting and viable to young people. We need, I believe the Ministry of Education reported that they had one psychologist, literally one. The psychiatric hospital, which caters not only for those with mental illnesses, but also those with drug dependencies. They have one rehab unit. Can we then promote psychiatry, therapy? Can we promote those disciplines which UE already offers, social work? Promote those disciplines and very gently steer our young people towards them. We can't make the choice for them, but we do know that everybody cannot be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, and quite frankly, those are fairly saturated professions in Barbados. And then we have these holes where we don't have enough social workers. That's the cry coming out of all of those departments. We don't have enough probation officers, also social work based. We need more of that discipline, and we should be looking to work to UE. Pitch it. When other universities overseas, you will see the ads coming up. We have a school of business. We have a school. Have UE do the same thing and promote what UE offers to our students that will allow us to plug our own deficiencies in manpower. It is not a new idea, Singapore does it well. They will guide and direct in terms of what they see as national need. And here's how you make it worth your while. This is where scholarships should be directed, bursaries, exhibitions, grants, preferential loans. Make it worth the while of the student to go in that direction. Have the guidance counselors on board so that when they have students who are not certain how their skill sets, and when I say skill sets, I mean in terms of the subjects that they are doing or how they want to choose their subjects and how they could best be deployed for employment opportunities, that they are very gently guided. You know, if you did psychology, you know, you would be fairly certain to get a job. You would be able to support a family because these are real life considerations that also have national implications. And then we have people paying into national insurance to look at that. You know, it all has a knock-on effect. if you are looking at curing the ills in society, because addressing crime really is addressing how society has flaws, how society has, I don't want to use the word failed, because a failed society has a particular meaning, but how society needs to support those who are falling through the cracks at the time being to bring them back on stream. And then when it comes to the police and the other disciplinary forces, that really needs to be in the schools. The commission recommends that you start recruiting from in the schools. Again, not a new idea. The cadets are an arm of the Barbados Defense Force. The police can have an arm that is school-based, so that you know when you're coming out, not every one of them will go towards the police service, but at least you would know that you have a complement that you can draw on, who already have been exposed to those basic skills of policing. And then, and we paid particular attention to the police, because not only are they crying out for manpower and funding and equipment, but the police, they are literally on the front line in the fight against crime. So we paid particular attention to the police. And whatever equipment they say that they need is what government needs to facilitate. And you will hear that as a running theme throughout the report, that government facilitates. Government is not intended to take over the police service and be calling the shots when high command should be doing that. That is not what we're looking at. We're talking about understanding from high command what we need and ensuring that they have it. There is no point, and we see it on the front page of the paper all the time, and this is just basic equipment. There is no point giving the police 6 shooters. I know we've moved past that, but this is just an example. When we know that Tech-9s and AK-47s and AR-15s are on the street, it makes no sense. So give them the equipment that they need. And detection and intelligence, of course, will be part of what they need, which allows me to segue into what is happening in Parliament as we speak. Most of the amendments are fairly innocuous. But what concerns me the most is the wireless intercept bill. Now, some of us have been wiretapped, because that's just a cute name for wiretapping, huh? Right. Some of us have been wiretapped. Some of us didn't actually care. But we have to be very, very careful how we sell things and how we critique things. Wiretapping is an essential in the arsenal of any modern police service. It is an essential in the arsenal of any modern police service. The police are not above the law, though, so when it was being done illegally, it quite greatly was dealt with in the law courts. We're now getting the legislation, and we should be at that point where we're breathing a sigh of relief that it is now going to be legal. But hear what? This piece of legislation sets up a commission of 3 members, one of whom is chosen by the minister, and we're just told the minister responsible for wire communications. You don't know which one it is specified, but that is what is in the legislation. So we have a commission of 3, where one is chosen by the minister, but all 3 are appointed by the minister. That makes a difference. One is his choice or her choice, but all three have to receive articles of appointment that are signed by the minister. Okay. That is number one. Number two, they are going to be paid. And that pay is not determined by the Public Service Commission. That pay is determined by the minister. Okay? Good. Not Public Service Commission, but the pay is determined by the minister. So all these Z scales and all of that are irrelevant. The minister will be choosing how much they get paid. So we put a commission in place, and the minister chooses them and chooses how to pay them. The minister, we have a commission with 3 persons, but by this legislation, the minister is responsible for issuing licenses that have interception devices. Okay? Not the commission. You put a commission in place, but the minister still, don't tell me it's too much because I'm not done yet. Okay? Okay. So the minister is, there are 3 members. One is the minister's choice. All 3 have their articles of appointment, that's the correct word, instruments of appointment, signed by the minister. The minister decides how much they are paid. The minister is issuing licenses, and the minister is responsible for creating the regulations under which the commission will function. Those regulations are not laid in Parliament today. Only the principal legislation. Now the practice is, this is not against the practice, the practice is that you pass the principal legislation, the act, and then the regulations come after, and something called a laying in Parliament happens. Literally put on the table, and if nobody has any objections within a time frame, it's passed, without anybody actually opening it and looking inside it. If no one objects, it will pass. Okay? The minister is responsible for making these regulations. And then we have a regime where a judge has to sign off on the application that is made either by the head of this commission or by the commissioner of police, which is also well and good. But then in relation to what is gathered, the minister decides what of the intercepted communications can be disclosed, including to foreign governments. So the minister sets up the commission, chooses one of the commissions, signs the instrument of appointment for all of them, determines their remuneration, issues licenses, sets up the regulations for the commission, decides what of the intercepted communications get disclosed. Parliament. And my biggest objection to this piece of legislation is how much of it sits in the lap of the political operative. We are in a very, very small and, let's face it, polarized society. And a government so minded and a minister so minded can use this for political purposes. That is the biggest objection to this piece of legislation. Now, it squares, and we have to be grateful, okay? It squares generally speaking, with our regional commitments. Okay? Generally speaking, because we are signatory to the, I want to get the correct titles, the Needham's Point Declaration. Okay? Needham's Point Declaration on Criminal Justice Reform, Achieving a Modern Criminal Justice System, which was signed, yes, here in Barbados at Needham's Point on 20th of October 2023. And it set out some objectives for regional governments as to what they should be looking to achieve. And of course, the gathering of intelligence is one of the primary purposes of a police service that is charged with the responsibility of upholding the laws. Okay? And we're not going to in any way deny that they have that right. But it is how it is administered. It is one other example of governmental interference in policing that as a country we have to be very, very wary of. It does not augur well for our future. This is not saying that it will happen, but it is saying that it can happen. And here is my other objection. It is supposed to be surreptitious. You're not supposed to know. I can tell you how I knew that I was being tapped, okay? But I won't share that in this public forum. But having found out that I was being tapped, I had no recourse or redress. And again, this legislation gives none. Absolutely none. No, I didn't care. But the truth is that as an attorney at law, I should care.
Yes.
Everything that my clients say to me it's not just confidential, it's privileged. There's a difference. You can have something that's confidential, and we all know what that means. But when something is privileged, it cannot be used in any forum for anything at all against you, for you, or otherwise without your permission. And here we are with a piece of legislation that opens up attorneys to the possibility of outing client privilege. You know it better, I think, in relation to doctors and your medical reports. Say you're on the phone with your doctor and you're discussing actual, intimate medical procedures. And these are intercepted. They too are not protected. So it is not just attorneys at law. It's anyone who has a privilege to mind that should be concerned about this piece of legislation. And because we do not know the parameters for being surveilled in this manner, I can't be 100% certain that because I am satisfied that I am running my practice properly and I am living my life above board, that I will not be tapped. We do not know who, because we haven't seen the regulations as yet. So once the Democratic Party's Commission wholeheartedly agrees that for intelligence gathering, the police needs to have access and equipment and facilities, because it collides with our right to privacy, because it collides with our very natural and normal and healthy suspicion of the incursions of government, the legislation needs to be very forthright about what protections are given to citizens who find themselves surveilled in this manner. That needs to be addressed. And I'm not going to say anything about taint, because taint is taint is taint, I am very certain that it is going to be a revenue generation project, because not a single member of the underworld is going to turn up to get their vehicle tested. In fact, they don't have a penchant for taking someone else's to do their dirty deeds. And they're not checking to see if the taint is passing anybody's legislation. So those of us who are the law-abiding citizens are the ones who will bear the brunt of having to pay to remove taint, which is not as easy as it seems. You can go and try and peel yours and you will see. And replacing taint, if you are so hungry, and the criminal elements will gallivant as they are accustomed because they are not in any way interested in taint. So, it's taint. So we have a lot of recommendations where the police are concerned, and I want to pause and give credit to Bertie Hines. Bertie Hines is a retired, very senior officer who hasn't retired and gone in his garden, but he's retired and gone in his library and his study. He's also a criminologist, just as I am. And his focus is on improving policing in Barbados. So he has 2 books published already, and I have no doubt that we will soon, I'm not outing him when I say that we will soon hear about the 3rd. I noticed a change on his phone, and I think we can make a guess as to what the name of that book will be. Okay, but his first was Policing a Dynamic Barbados from 2020, and his second, Criminal Justice and the Police, Some Contemporary Perspectives, was 2023. And here he is in 2025, getting ready to publish another one. I think we could call that prolific, and I think we can also call it an outstanding son of the soil who understands his duty to his country and his community. And so a lot of the policing recommendations were not wholesale, but definitely influenced by his writings. We also did other research outside of that because we wanted to not just put forward recommendations, but show that they work other places so that you can have some degree of certainty. Obviously, because it works somewhere else does not mean that you can bring it wholesale and it will work, but at least it is a template that you can use and tailor to our particular situations. So we took a careful look at the police and what they have to deal with on a daily basis. And also in speaking to current police officers. And I'll tell you, they're very pleased by this report. They've been stopping me and actually telling me what else needs to go into the next one. Okay? But they were very clear. And I see their point. To be a policeman in Barbados is to offer public service. They get paid so weekly, WEAKL, that it has to be public service. Entry-level constables are paid slightly more than the youngsters were paid to clean the ash. Not disparaging them, just by way of comparison. But unlike the cleaning of ash, they very literally, on a daily basis, put their lives on the line. Because of this, or at least that is the rationale that is given, because of this, police officers in Barbados are not insured. We have, I can see some former police officers in here, stop me if I'm wrong. Police officers in Barbados are not insured. When they get into an accident, the police vehicle is insured, but not the flesh and blood inside that police van. They are not insured. every day without fear, because if they had fear, they would not turn up for work. Every day without fear, they put their legs on the line for us. And I do not think that it is an unfair suggestion to pay them properly and to insure them. They have families. I don't even know how they pass for personal insurance, because the form that gets sent to me about when last you jumped out of a plane and all kind of craziness, they can't pass that test. Okay? So I don't know, but they should not have to do it privately. They are working for the state, and the state should insure them. So this commission calls for better pay for the police and better working conditions. Now, better pay can happen in several different ways. Modern policing is very, very different. And there are opportunities for specialization, because I know, like most organizations, you only have one head, even though this present administration tried to give them two. You can only have one head. And it will always be bottom heavy. So there has to be something for the constables, and as we have them now, senior constable, which, in my humble opinion, is an artificial demarcation. But there must be something that allows them within their profession to specialize, so that we don't have to see them waiting at the supermarket, because it's not fair for them to have to work the long hours for the state, and then they still can't feed their family, so they have to go and stand up in the supermarket to work some more long hours in order to carry home an extra berry. So how about we have these specialties within the police force that each is rewarded? The leader of the opposition took exception to the, as we call them, the closed police, the detectives, receiving what is essentially another salary, the amount that is, and only that department is receiving it. I can tell you that police officers are hopping mad about that. It's a divide and rule tactic. But hear what? If you had officers who were allowed to develop their skills in, say, cell phone harvesting of information, if they were allowed to develop their skills in community policing, because community policing is not putting an outpost in Pine. That is not community policing, all right? That is a mini police station that has been put there. Community policing is actually getting involved in community activities. Community policing is actually, that's the word, immersing yourself in a community. And it has benefits flowing back, because that's where you're going to get your intelligence from. But you first have to have the confidence of the people, and that calls for some, of course. Intimate partner violence. Can we have some specialization where that is concerned, so that we have opportunities for officers who are at the base level to gain something extra? It's on you if you choose not to enter one of these specialties. That's on you. But at least have the opportunities there, so that the officers know that they can do some extra courses and earn some extra cash, because they are actually deriving a benefit. And look at that. The nation derives a benefit from it as well. So there's that knock-on effect. And those are just a few of the examples of how you can use what you have to create space. So you're not talking about the artificial barrier that is created with a senior constable who simply by dint of number of years is receiving an increase. That's also well and good, but it is more rewarding to receive the increase because you have earned an additional skill. It would also set you up. It would also set you up for promotion, okay? And all the modern investigative techniques that have a reliance on technology are areas where the police service can build out itself and even bring in specialties. We have a forensic sciences center, which is a very beautiful building on the outside. I have no idea what goes on the inside because it's not forensic science. Nothing has happened there for years. It is easily the best kept secret in Barbados. That is a well-looking building on the outside that hardly a member of staff has crossed the threshold of in years. Absolute years. But we know that we are 3 and 4 decades into DNA testing. And imagine if the police had that capability and did not have to rely on, because that's what we're doing right now. We're sending, well, when they bother, because a lot of cases come to court and they just have thrown their hands up in the air and the lab's not working, so we're done with that. Okay, and that's just a fact. That's just a fact. So when you allow the police to see themselves in a different light, it also increases morale. The last thing you want is a police service with no morale. They're simply not going to do their jobs well. And that is a great jumping off point for yet another focus of this commission. Again, I take a pause to credit, he doesn't like the title, but I'll give it to him, Dr. Derek Ali, and his work in relation to the untouchables. I don't have to explain to you what untouchables are. You know what it means, and you even know how it plays out in Barbados. But I will say this, that whilst we spend a lot of time whispering about it, when we did our on-the-ground campaign, one matter in particular was constantly spoken of by people on the ground. Some call it the Good Friday incident, some call it the Black Friday incident, but we all know about the infamous telephone call that sent police officers with their tail between their legs during COVID, when, as far as the police were concerned, there were flagrant breaches of the COVID regulations. We know who was on each side of that phone call. It has not, but never been in any way denied. Okay? It has never been denied. But that situation was fingered by quite a few people in our on-the-ground canvas. And they hold the view that that signaled a change in Barbados, because it seemed as though there were some people who were untouchable and that they enjoyed protections that others do not get. I remember one young man in particular who at first did not say a word. We were talking to a group that was under a tree. I'm not calling anything a block because I don't know it to be that. A group of youngsters under a tree, and we were talking with them and asking them the questions that we had. And he was sitting there minding his own business. I won't say what that business was. And not looking like he was paying attention. And about 10 minutes into the exchange, he just piped up, "You know what's wrong with you? You know what's wrong with you? You don't want to talk about what's really going on in this country." I said, "Let me hear what you think is going on in this country." He was like, "I here running my business." I am not going to him. "I here running my business to make $1. All right? And the police can come here and run me in a minute. But they got men doing this same thing over their shop, and nobody is running them, and everybody knows." Okay? Was he wrong though? Okay? He said a bunch of young men running out here with guns, and none of them don't own the guns. Guns is get right in this country. He was full of information. Okay? We think they are not paying attention. We think that they have separated themselves from society and they don't look back. But what was very clear to me is that they have separated themselves from society because society does not serve them or serve them well. Okay? And they were very, very clear and had other examples too of the untouchables in our society. How do guns get here? There's the odd man that's going to pick one apart and put it in a barrel. But how did the drugs get here? Drugs and guns. What happened to the case that I remember of the tires to the front of the container and the back was nothing but contraband? What has ever happened to that case? We just heard here in Barbados about a whole car ring coming out to the UK. And the cars are here in Barbados. And apparently the star brought them because we have not to this moment heard a name here in Barbados, national or non-national, linked to that inquiry. Okay? We know about who was on social media waving about their invitations to the opening of Parliament. I had run in that election, I didn't get you on, but that's okay. All right? These things are not escaping the notice of ordinary Barbadians. Okay? They are upset, and this is every administration. This is not just this one. That the Auditor General, and we have one right now, but the last one just retired, and we haven't heard. Okay. Litany of these are not just complaints. When you read the Auditor General's reports, successive years, we have terms for them: malfeasance and misfeasance. Okay. A lot of them amount to criminal acts. And we read them, we hold our heads for exactly a fortnight, and then the bewilderment is gone. But the people on the street are keeping this in their minds, that it is indicative of a set, and that is in terms of Venn diagrams now, a set in Barbados that is untouchable. And they watch and take note. They mention the ecstasy board. I have always been tickled by the name of that board. The people on the street mention the ecstasy board. And they're like, how it is that the captain get there. How it is that the CEO, the chairman of the board is on board, but he's the first to get paid. How it is that one crew member, the one black man on the board, no, I am reporting what is being said on the street. And it lends to that view that there are untouchables in society. They even asked, and I am not this, we tried our best to be impartial. We even got asked how Donville get charged overseas. And he's a felon in the US for something that started here. And nobody bring the charges against him here. Our people are paying attention on the ground. So they see all of these things happening, and they recognize, they have the perception that there is another set of Barbados besides the one that they're living. Because they see the parade of young men, mostly, but sometimes young women, and sometimes they're a little older, going to prison for a ham, going to prison for spraying deodorant. They see it gets reported, but then they see and they feel it to be unfair. They feel it to be unfair, that it looks as though there is a section of the Barbadian society that can do whatever it feels like, legal or illegal, without consequence. they view this. This was the part that went the deepest. They view this as a reason why crime is so rampant in Barbados. And here is where was the surprise for us, Derek. And you know, if you remember when Maxine came, Maxine was in charge of reporting from the other side. There was one group dealing with on the street. Maxine was in charge of reaching out to the business sector. There was almost the opposite feeling coming from the business sector. They felt they were being hard done by because of what was happening at the ports of entry. They felt that they were the ones, because when there is street crime, it tends to be their businesses that are being broken into. They felt that they were the ones who were seeing that crime was going unpunished. And you know what that means? There's nobody in this country that's happy with what's going on in crime. And the solution has to be deal with it all. Deal with it all. When we looked at the police statistics, the most recent ones are up to December of 2024. They release them half yearly, but they print them yearly for December. When we looked at the statistics, the street crime is rampant. But then they have a section for what they call white collar crime. And you know, it's still theft. It is not the white collar crime that we're imagining. And that's why in our report, we use two different, I'm not using the word, we use two different groups. We have the white collar crime, which would be, you know, the theft from the business and things of that nature. But we also looked at corporate crime, which quite frankly, Maxine reported that who she was interviewing didn't even view as a crime. So the underreporting to BRA and CAIPO of the earnings of your business wasn't viewed as a crime. Okay? Insider trading was just a thing. The handshake, that wasn't really, that was par for the course. Better business. You know, so when you were speaking to Barbadians on the street, and when you were speaking to Barbadians in the boardroom, you got completely different perceptions of what the crime situation was in Barbados, and each group felt hard done by. Okay? It has to be that you fix it all. Fix it all. That means that the police have to be free to police. Government needs to put a legislative framework in place. Government needs to allocate the funding so that they can get the machinery and can pay for the manpower. And then government needs to sit back and let the police do their work. Right? Let the police do their work. That actually is a free solution. You don't spend money on that. You just have to step back, take your nose out of the business, and allow the police. And if they have to come for a big shot, so be it. If they have to come for your son, you know who the good lawyers are. Make the phone. That is the phone call that you need to make. Okay? If Barbados is to get better from its crime situation, we have to fix that trust issue that obviously has broken down in this country between government and its people, and definitely with the relationship that it has with the police service. Because if they're not trusting of the police, there's not going to be any passing of information, and intelligence is the bedrock of detective work. Okay? It has to be that we have these initiatives in place. And we have to be mindful too of the changing face of crime detection. The police are going to pick up a whole lot more now that we have the proliferation of CCTV. It is not as widespread as in metropolitan countries. If you can't walk 2 steps in London without a camera, okay? But we're getting there, this much is clear. I just drove through the plane, if I may please, I just drove through the plane and recognized that there are no cameras in the plane. They're in Old Town, they're in Oistins, they're in Bridgetown, they're along the highways. We are getting to that point where CCTV surveillance is going to be more the norm than the exception. Because even though we do not have the national network, most houses of a certain value and most businesses also have CCTV. So, and I do know from wearing my other hat that when incidents happen, the police canvass the houses around and ask for footage. It is making crime detection, especially since CCTV footage right now is like watching TV. You hear clearly, you see clearly. It is making crime detection that much easier in terms of figuring who truly is a problem. All right? So we need to have that level of security of mind that our police will be allowed to police. Because that really is what we discovered in our research, that people in Barbados are simply not happy. And I'll say, when discussing trust, politicians and police were high up on the list of who Barbadians were not trusting. That is a serious indictment on all of us. Yeah. On all of us. That calls for some personal introspection, because at the end of the day, we still vote for them, you know? It calls for some personal introspection, and it calls for actually doing things different. So we can build that trust. We just have to work at it. And again, speaking about building trust, one of the biggest failings of Barbadian society, as far as this report unearthed, was of our criminal justice system, from start to finish. From the point of the police executing warrants in less than humane methods, to what people on the street see as police brutality, and one person actually spoke to seeing our young men charged and walking across the yard in handcuffs. But they recalled incidents where members higher up in society were charged but were allowed to walk freely to court. And you know, the things that people were referencing as though it had just happened, and I had to scratch my head because it had gone past me, but it was not going past our ordinary Barbadians. So from the time of being in the police station all the way through to incarceration, there were complaints. Now, we did a poll and we were asking who had issues with the criminal justice system, as victim and as accused. And both sides had problems. Victims feel left out. They are, to be quite honest, as far as our system setup is concerned, you view yourself as a victim, the state views you as a witness. And that's it. you're the virtual complainant. The complainant is the state. Okay? So the victims don't feel as though they get justice. And then the accused also don't feel as though they get justice. So we're back to this again, where clearly, I don't want to say we could pop, because I feel we can haul it back. So the string is slack and it's dipping, but we can haul this back. And without going into more, because we've lived this experience of delays and you know, we know what all of that is. But if we had, and again, we borrowed this from England, they have two things. They have victim liaison officers who are police officers, you see another specialty right there, okay, who stick to the victims. Sometimes they even move into the victim's house, depending on the type of matter that it is. And it is their duty to walk them through the process so that they understand that right now we're collecting evidence, but as soon as we have enough, we will likely be in a position to arrest someone, and then this is how the court system works, and they may appeal. There is someone to guide you through that process. And similarly, for those persons who are arrested at the police station, they also provide duty solicitors, so that the talk that we hear about who get beat and who got banged over their head and all these things, some of which are true and substantiated, and some of which are borrowed folklore. We are aware of all of this. But as one judge recently said, one slap is too many. So if we had that duty solicitor role, who does the same thing but now for the accused, to help them understand the process and be present there with them. And I can tell you, legal aid is not that expensive. I'm not going to tell you what we get paid for a legal aid matter. Please understand that it's such a small fraction of what we could charge privately that it can only be viewed as a public service. But we still do it because it is a necessary public service. So I see that there can be that role as well. If we have the victim liaison officers and we have the justice solicitors, that we will have less of that, because lack of knowledge is the biggest reason for suspicion. And we can find ways to get around that by putting things in place. But because the study is about how we rescue Barbados from crime, we also pay attention to that last step. When a person is convicted and sentenced, they're already warrants of the state. They need to be commanded. And I mean by that they need to be guided. We are not very big on rehab in Barbados. But if we do not make that effort, recidivism is going to become the future. Recidivism is you keep going through the mill. You're committing more crimes, getting caught. Same things all over again. Repeat offenders. The way, I don't think we will ever be without crime, but the management of crime should be targeted at the prevention of crime. And one of the ways to do that is to make rehabilitation a focus. There are different types of rehabilitation. There are a lot of our inmates who cannot read. If you can't read, your job opportunities are limited. You're taught big on the block, but you can't even come to money. You know, these things, it is not a joke. These are realities in Barbados. You are a teacher, you know that you can spot it from early. And it is usually that disruptive element in class. They come in two types. The ones who are bored up to their minds because they finished the work and half hour left and there's nothing to do but kicking chair in front. Then there are the others who are struggling and frustrated with the education process. And we do not have any way in our education process to say something, and a lot of them are in prison. So now that you have a captive audience, no pun intended, spend the time to fix them. Give them that remedial education. Make sure they're coming up with a skill. We need also to have a real probation department that handles parole so that you are easing them back into society and not just opening the gates and letting them catch the next bus to 6 roads and expect that's what happens and expecting them to act any different. It has to be a concerted effort. And part of what you have to do, and I'm hustling, I'm trying to get through all the chapters in some form or fashion. Part of what you need to do at Dodds and at the psychiatric hospital has to deal with their mental health. We, as a nation, parody mental health. We talk about people in the Jenkins, we come from behind the green gates, we have all of the sayings, and we cross the road like if there are lepers. But when we break a leg, we will go and get it set and walk with a cast and cane and a walker, assured that we are getting the best help. Mental illness is another physiological disorder, just like if you can't see properly and you have to take medication for high blood pressure. It is the same. If we get to the point where as a nation we can view it as the same, we can then treat they ought to. A mental illness and criminality combine a lot. So we need to reach the point too, and part of removing that stigma is so that our youngsters, well, our sufferers, because they could be of any age, do not feel like they can't go to the psychiatric hospital for drug treatment. Because that happens now. They will tell the magistrate, send me along up, I don't want to go down there. People can take that, I'm mad. Alright? And it is serious. It is serious. Because it is a barrier to being cured, and they will come back through the court doors again. They will come back because the problem, the underlying problem remains. I have seen rehabilitated youngsters. I have seen this one young man who, when you see what he looks like struggle, and see what he looks like otherwise, and how attentive he is to this family, and the fact that he can hold on a job and is not even minding criminality once he is clean, you understand that as a nation, we have, it is for us, we're the ones who are afraid. That fear is palpable, you could touch it on the street. So then, if we are the ones who are afraid, let us be the ones to fix what is going wrong. Let us be the ones to offer that helping hand and say, this person needs care. Okay? And while we're at it, bring back the drug treatment court. Because that captured them as they were engaging in criminality. and offered them treatment instead of punishment. We need to have that back. We need to have that back. Things get stopped for political reasons, and we're aware of that. But at the end of the day, outside of our political ambitions and ahead of our political ambitions have to be our considerations for our country, and even if not extended to our country, the safety of our families. So therefore, all of these things that we're doing, we're going to get some benefit out of it. We're going to get some benefit out of it. And our health system itself needs to be, it needs refocusing. Because when a man, and I keep saying a man because of prevalence, when a man is shot, when someone is stabbed, everything stops at our one hospital. That is urgent business. But we still have the same number of doctors and nurses and RNs. So it means that who was there before has to leave. So it is in our best interest all around. I'm giving you all of the reasons to get on board with it. Because yes, it is a whole of country exercise. Not in the way that this present administration sells it. Because they're looking to pass the buck. That's different. I will get to that in a minute. Right? But the benefits that we derive by doing the things that will divert from a life of crime will benefit all of us. So the attempts, and this is the running theme, the changing of social behavior. We couldn't cover everything because we actually wanted it to be read. It was going to be too much. We had to cut out some of it. So sports and education and all of these others which we know have real impact on how people relate to society are mentioned, but it is not developed. Hopefully, and I threw the challenge out to the president and the leader of the opposition to get other commissions working to deal with those in a wholesale manner, so that what we are presenting to the country is tied together, but showing that we are setting our minds on nation building. Okay? So let me talk a little bit about this code of country exercise. As I spoke, I hope each of you was getting some understanding of what your role could be in this entire process of fixing Barbados. Because we do need everybody to be on board. But here's the thing, or as the young people say here, we elect governments to lead. We elect governments to set policy. They set the tone and the framework. Individuals, NGOs, private sector, everybody falls in line behind the lead that government sets. Think about when government cut public sector salaries and the response of the private sector. They'll follow the lead that government sets. So it is incumbent upon government to set the tone. Not to take over and take charge, baby. No, that's not it. Okay? It is about creating the space for the agencies of government to implement the policies. But they have to lead. And so their council, I can't remember its full name, whose chair demitted office in the most spectacular and explosive fashion about 2 months ago. They're really good at acronyms. They're really very good at catchphrases. Implementation escapes them. But they set up that council and stepped back. That is not what is done. And we didn't want them to take our word for it. So we put the entirety of the plan from Estonia into this report. We canvassed a lot of countries. There are quite a few examples in here from other places. But the reason that Estonia matters is because in 1999, historians in here can tell me if I have the year correct, when the Soviet Union collapsed, all of the separate countries that resulted fell into anarchy, pure anarchy. By 2001, their homicide rate was through the roof. I dare say we're there now in Barbados. They started conducting studies, how are we going to fix this? And they came up with a concept. But it was a council led by ministers of government, a council that was fully flexible to change depending on where the focus needed to be. So it wasn't one minister. It wasn't the prime minister only. But each minister knew that their ministry had a role to play in the fight against crime. And from a homicide rate of 9.4 per 100,000 of the population in 2001, by 2022, it had dropped to 1.35 per 100,000 of the population. That is a model that we need to study and figure out what parts of it we can use for ourselves. And here's what they did. They paid careful attention to crime prevention strategies. They integrated it into their education system. So the smallest child was taught how to act, behave, etc. You're not getting it home, you get it inside here. Again, the captive audience. They give a state guarantee of public order, and then they set about with all these social interventions to ensure that they could fix. And then you know that's one generation. In one generation, they could solve this. And it was about strengthening families, purposeful education, cultural emphasis, a strong youth policy, how they were dealing with drugs and alcohol changed so it became more of a social policy. And then they had a national mentorship program. So it was designed to influence people away from criminality. And then alongside that, because some will fall through the cracks, in guaranteeing public safety, they made sure that the police force had everything that it needed. Because if the state is giving you all of these opportunities to do good, and you still choose to do ill, then the police still had a role. They monitored hotspots. They monitored individuals even from school age, so that the teachers in here who know that you can spot the persons who will be issues later on in life if there is no intervention. That there is intervention. Not that you say it as a teacher, but understanding too that this is not the focus of teaching. They put the psychologists in the schools. In the schools. I recommend that Estonia be studied. Look at other places too, but that is a remarkable achievement in one generation, and we could do well to start now, because the earlier you start, the earlier you will start seeing the results. And then that big question, how do you pay for all of this stuff? Because we recognize you're asking for equipment, you're asking for people, you're asking for funding, there are programs, higher salaries, we want the police to be insured, we're asking for a lot. We want to have all this social re-engineering and the schools change. How are we going to pay for all of this? And the answer is really simple. It is really, really simple. The UN, I can't remember how many years ago, came up with 17 sustainable development goals. Ending poverty, and just to call a few off the top of my head, ending poverty, curbing crime, social network is to be fixed, housing solutions, quality education, decent work, all of these, there were 17 of them. And they didn't just come up with them in a vacuum. They said, if you as a country have programs designed to meet these goals, we will give you funding, grant funding, not loans. So there is a way to craft your policy document in relation to your changing education phase, designed to meet this social need, and I'm just using education as an example, designed to meet this social need with the aim of the prevention of crime, and the UN will fund it. I checked, and even the NGOs who wish to get involved, and there are quite a few of them like Barbados, there's grant funding for them as well. There's a whole website that's called grants to apply for. Any search that you do will help you out there. And then, to be real, we know that there's a lot of wastage in Barbados. The Auditor General's report speaks loudly to it. We have projects like HOPE that we're still waiting. We were told that there was going to be a commission of inquiry or something of the sort into the HOPE project. We don't even know if it has got off the ground yet, if it is X amount of hot air or not. But the reality is that if we are prudent in managing our money, we will have the funds that we can dedicate to crime prevention. I used this as an example in the press conference, and I use it here again. People complain about the National Botanical Gardens. They didn't complain that it is not a garden or that there was nothing botanical about it. They complain that it's muddy and there's no place to park. And in one week, government got pavers put down and a whole car park asphalt. So government has funds for what is a priority for government. Okay? We have a berriffle of consultants paid from the public purse who have not a single day respected the people of Barbados and at least give some sort of bullet point report to justify their existence and their suffering. At the public purse. I was trying to remember the exact expression, but yeah. We can find the money as a country if we see this as a priority. So the challenge to the next Democratic Party administration is to make our people a priority. Do what is necessary to fix the crime problem. Be prudent with the people's money and get on with the business of running.
Verla, we can take a question.
Oh, I can take questions, yeah.
We will be accepting questions now, so just indicate with a show of hands, and then we can go right on.
Just one minute.
Yeah, sure.
I believe that the reputation really should be.
Derek, come forward.
No, I don't play voice in chat. I really believe that the presentation we heard just now is really fit for all these social partnership requirements. That's why.
That was an excellent presentation.
I can ask a question.
So, first of all, let me just say that was an awesome presentation, right? Where you go as far as mentioned from the juvenile state right up to you call offenders, right? My question to you would be, what advice would you have for the person now that feels like they have no way out of crime? Who probably come up in crime, or would you say in the dialectic language is come up in crime? And living that from a young age, that's all they see, that's all they know, they feel it there in case within this likelihood that we would consider to be crime. What advice would you have for those people?
All right, so today I didn't focus on that social re-engineering section of the report. The solution is not to pay the criminals to not do crime. Because let's face it, if you give me money, I will buy some dogs.
That's your profession.
That's my profession. If you give a farmer money, you're gonna get some fertilizer. Some seeds. And if you give a gunman money, he's going to buy video. It just stands to reason. And I think we're reaping because the money, because we're still not sure how much money it is, because I heard three different figures. I heard one the first time, I saw the men on the front page of the newspaper, which is the height of audacity, on the front page of the newspaper complaining about what they did not receive, and then I heard a different figure afterwards. So I'm not really sure how much it is that they got, but what we know for sure is that the type of firepower that we're seeing on the street improved, if I can use that word, since then. All right? And that's all I would say about that. The solutions come from the community. And Lumumba, he was the biggest proponent of this. We know him here, but we don't know that he has actually been consulted down the islands as well. Okay? It has to come from the community. Each community is going to have a different response. What we do have, or used to have, is community centers that allowed for the expending of energy in a different way. It also allowed for mentors and role models to be present in their lives because they know one thing because that is all that they've been shown. But you have to be showing them something different. I am in favor of the community centers being reopened. I can't imagine why they closed in the first place. they not only engender community feeling and community spirit, but it is someplace safe to allow your children to go with activities that suit them, which is why it has to be community driven. It has to be that suit them. So I might like basketball, but in that neighborhood, it may be football. There's no point in my coming and setting up a netball team, okay? It's not what I want. So you have to be liaising on the ground, and you have to allow the community members to decide what it is they wish to do. Within the report, there is the recommendation that not constituency councils. That probably was too unruly, but parish councils, so that you still have some element of local input into the programs that are available on the ground, that you will know that there is an interest, and there's not going to be just one interest and one focus. So, but your community leaders will know that this is what the young people are clamoring for, and you give it to them. Even if they have to, if it is not in their immediate community, say for instance, the community center at Beacons has a focus, and this would make sense, of volleyball, because they already have the infrastructure there for volleyball, for football, but we have some youngsters that are interested in IT tech, and the community center further down Black Rock has that. They need to know that there are these linkages, that they will be able to do that correct. And once we allow our people to have some sort of self-realization, you get greater self-esteem out of that as well. It's not just somebody lording it over you, but you get to decide your own destiny to a certain extent. So we recommend that there is a community push, that grassroots development is likely to have greater buy-in. And we saw this in Plain years ago, when the Plain was a hot spot. And then we saw the creative workshop, they excelled in basketball, they had a fantastic football team. You know, we saw that there were things, there was a neighborhood that every corner you went around, it had a road tennis court. We don't push road tennis enough in this country. We don't push sports. Where's Dr. Reed? She was around earlier. Okay. Then this is her bugbear. Okay, that there is more that we can do with sports to reach out to our young people and pull them away from that brink. We need, I mean, technology is so wide. Like I saw a young lady, she's into gaming. She's back in Barbados and she's interested in teaching our youngsters gaming. Fantastic, because there's quite a few of them that spend time playing games anyhow. It is good for them to see how they're made. That may, you know, be an outlet for some of them. But these things have to be organic. It has to be that they're coming from the community. There has to be community buy-in, and that is the way to get them to see a different way besides the one that is obviously being demonstrated to them, and that they can see that there are other options.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Just turn on.
Have any issues? Just speak it. Just speak it. Okay.
Let me say, I came here a bit late, but from what I've listened to, you've given us some very valuable information. This is my first lunch session. What plans of your group? What plans have you got getting this message that you give to this audience here today on behalf of the country party to get out to the public? We need to get out there After every introduction, lecture that I've finished so far, is being said, let us get the information out. That's my first question. I also have done one too, as an attorney. You're here to help. Say I committed an offense, I'm living here, I committed an offense, no, I'm not gonna say the state, in Canada. I went to Canada, and I spent the time there. Why is it that Barbadians are of the impression that having spent the time in Canada for the offense that I've committed, that the Barbadian judiciary should try me? Are you saying that the offense that I committed concerns Canada as well as Barbados, but I was never questioned here before I spent my time overseas?
Yes, that's exactly what we're saying, but let me deal with the first one first. Even though it is beyond me, I am not involved in the dissemination of the information. What I will say is, starting from the basic, the first print of the books went on day one. And we had to go back to the printers for a second print. I was hoping to collect some on the way here, but they were not ready. Hopefully, he did tell me next week, but I was, you're still hoping, but if you got some, then can I have them please, right? They were not ready. The electronic version went out Wednesday. Okay, the electronic versions, both the executive summary and the full document were shared on Wednesday. If you all have them, please share them to everybody. That is one way of getting the information out there. I am aware that the IT team of the Office of the Leader of the Opposition is actively breaking it down into bite-sized chunks. And someone, I don't see Andrew right now, but someone today asked why don't we have town hall meetings to take it around. I can pass on information, I am the chair, but I don't set that timetabling. I can pass on the information. I am aware as well, because I was asked, but I can't say I'm aware. I think some element of it is going to be in the annual conference as well, because they messaged and asked me to give them the information. And if you can think of any other ways, then absolutely. Now, to deal with the way to your question.
I suggested they come to with something in our office.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. To deal with the way to your issue. I noticed you skirting around the issue of wanting to talk about Canada, but what happened in the US is a fact, so we can speak about it, okay? The charge that was faced in the US by our comrade started here, as far as the evidence that was led is concerned, okay? It started here. In order to get to be some element of money laundering, some element of fraud, there had to have been an original action that was illegal. The original action that court case in the US threw up happened here in Barbados. Now, that does not mean that you have to be charged in Barbados. Clearly, the decision has been taken not to charge in Barbados. And that's fine. Other people made that decision, okay? Other people made that decision. It is fortunately in Barbados, as far as our written laws are concerned, not a political decision either, okay? But that's the reality. That's what came out in the trial. That is not anybody with a supposition. That came out in that trial, okay? So there is a school of thought that it should have gone one step further here, since the originating issue was here, okay? That is the legal position that you asked me for. Let me go further and speak to political perceptions, because we have to remember that we are not operating in a purely legal environment. There are optics that also come into play. So with or without charge, there's always going to be some person or persons who will say, you get charged and get found guilty somewhere else, okay? And that will remain because it happened, okay? It happened. That is a political reality as well as a legal reality, okay? That we as a party would do well to face frontally. And that is my personal opinion. That has nothing to do with the commission.
Yes, I microphone.
Okay.
First of all, as Verla said, I really think that what we present is the most experience. You are the commission are working, and the commission on doing such an extensive research job in the women cross-section communities. And really, congratulations to the people out there that you went to, because out there, you want to be able to come here and deliver to us your findings. So, those are the things that we have. I regulation briefly, I find that we don't have that correct conversation about the mental illness that is a very heavy connection to crime. In my way, we'll be able to address that elsewhere in other forms, and I find that people talk about it, but they like it. My question to you is, how would you suggest, or how can we know we have a police service that is trained to be reactive? How can we balance out that reactive approach of the police service in communities, balance it with a more connected kind of proactive approach within communities to gain that trust from the ghetto communities?
And it's not just the ghetto. There's a whole section in the report that deals with community-oriented policing. And the intention is that you have not just the reactive policing, which is always going to remain a focus of policing. They have to react to things that happen. But in the preventative measure that the police have a role to play in as well within the communities, that they are building a rapport with the community. That's the intent of community policing. That is soft policing, and that is the actual terms that are used, the actual term that is used, soft policing versus hard policing. And the soft policing is the, interacting before there's any dissent, never mind illegality. That you're interacting with the public and you're building relationships so that when there is a point of friction, that the police are
Ready.
and a second thought. You without a second thought, you would go to the police for resolution. There are proposals. I can tell you it's a whole lot of pages. It was hard to speak to all today, but there are proposals that would allow police officers to be trained in mediation so that on the ground they can diffuse situations before it reaches the point of criminality. Mental health would benefit from that. domestic violence situations would benefit from that. Just interpersonal neighbor-to-neighbor relations would benefit from that. So the intention is that you don't only have the hard policing where they're reactive, but you also have the soft policing, which is more preventative, and that the two work together to calm the crime situation, and that as a society alongside them, that we are looking for the active solutions to fix the crime problem. Okay, I don't see any other hands. Thank you all very, very much for having me here today.
Thank you. As a member of the commission, I take responsibility to give you for the tax. Because the tax is not only today's presentation, it is really about the commitment and the hard work demonstrated by the chairperson for them. And not only keeping the commission going, because she insisted that we met every week in the first 2 months of the commission's work. Every Wednesday, we came here, whether we had a report to present, whether we had nothing to discuss, we found something to discuss when we got here, and we all were asked to do little presentations to get ourselves focused on the work. So the presentation at the opposition's office on Emancipation Day was, to me, one of the happiest days, because I said that for the work of the DLP in opposition since 2018, where we were able to deliver something that is going to benefit Barbados. But even if it's getting the government's response as it did today, because the things in the House that are represented today, I was told they agree on them last week, that they had to do it. So, well, on behalf of the entire audience, local and online, on the executive department, and so on behalf of the office of the opposition, we want to thank you for continuing this work. As I said in the opening statement, I wish that the government of Barbados, through the social partnership, could find the wisdom and the commitment to Barbados to invite you to come to the social partners and do a session that will certainly benefit the entire Barbados. So once again, thank you.